My name is Maria, and I'm 27 years old. I never thought one simple decision could flip my life upside down. Everything seemed so normal at first, until it wasn't. Let me tell you how it all happened. It began with a festival, one of those lively events where everyone in town gathers to celebrate. The square was buzzing with music, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn. Kids were running around with painted faces, while families sat together chatting and eyeing the day. I was having a great time with my friends, soaking in the festive atmosphere, when I noticed someone standing by himself at the edge of the crowd. He was tall and had a quiet, distant look about him, like he didn't quite belong. He stayed on the sidelines the whole time, never joining the dancing or laughing. Meanwhile, I continued enjoying myself, but every now and then I caught him glancing at me. It was a little strange, but something about it made me curious. By the end of the day, I had almost forgotten about the quiet stranger. A few days later, while I was hanging laundry outside, my sister handed me a note. It didn't have a name on it. "I saw you at the festival. Can we talk?" it said. I felt surprised and curious. Who could it be? After thinking for a moment, I replied, "Who is this?" The answer came quickly. "I'm the man from the festival. You looked lovely, and I'd like to get to know you." At first, I wasn't sure how to feel. It was odd to get a message from someone I didn't know, but something about it made me curious, so I decided to keep the conversation going. Over the next few days, we exchanged notes. He was always kind and respectful, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. "You have a kind heart," he wrote once. "I can tell you're special." His words were flattering, and soon I found myself looking forward to his messages. Then one day, out of nowhere, he wrote something that completely shocked me. "I want to marry you," he said. "I see a future with you, a home, a family. Please say yes." I was stunned. We barely knew each other. His words felt serious, but also strangely sincere. After talking it over with my parents, I agreed to meet him in person. When we met, he was just as thoughtful and kind as he had been in his letters. He had a calm presence that made me feel at ease. He talked about his dreams of starting a family and building a life together. Before long, we got engaged. Our wedding was simple, held under the old trees in the village. I wore a plain white dress, and he looked sharp in a tailored coat. I remember feeling hopeful and happy, convinced I had found someone who truly cared about me. The first few months of marriage were wonderful. He was sweet, always bringing me little surprises and saying kind things. In the evenings, we would sit by the fire, talking about our dreams for the future. I felt lucky to have him by my side. We would take walks in the evening, hand in hand, and I often thought to myself how fortunate I was to have such a loving husband. But things started changing after a while. He began coming home late, always saying he had work to do. At first, I didn't think much of it. Life gets busy sometimes, right? But then I noticed other things. He grew distant and stopped sharing his thoughts with me. He became very protective of his things, especially his letters. It felt like a wall had suddenly come up between us, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get through to him. One night, while he was taking a bath, I saw an envelope on the table. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were letters from another woman. The words were warm and full of affection. My heart sank. I couldn't believe it. He had been writing to her for months, maybe even before we got married. The words, "I miss you" and "You mean everything to me" were written in bold letters, and they stung like a knife to my chest. When he came out, I showed him the letter. He looked shocked, then ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was a mistake. Please forgive me." I didn't know what to say. I felt hurt, confused, and angry all at once. How could he do this to me? I had trusted him completely. That night I packed my things and went to my parents' house. For weeks I stayed there trying to figure out what to do. My parents encouraged me to forgive him for the sake of our future. But I wasn't sure I could. After a lot of thinking, I decided to give him another chance. Maybe he was truly sorry, and maybe things would get better. We moved back in together and tried to start fresh. For a while, things seemed to improve. He promised to be more open with me, and for a brief time, I believed we could rebuild our relationship. But things weren't the same. The trust was gone, replaced by a constant worry that he might hurt me again. 2 months later, I found out he was still writing to her. This time there were no excuses. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I packed my bags and left for good. Starting over wasn't easy. I found a job in a nearby town and worked hard to support my family. There were tough days when I felt lonely and overwhelmed, but I reminded myself that I deserved better. I didn't want to live a life where I constantly doubted someone who was supposed to love me. I focused on my work, made new friends, and slowly started to rebuild my life. Every day was a challenge, but it was also a step towards something better. One day, while I was walking home from work, I stopped by a small cafe. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. Sitting there, sipping my coffee, I realized how far I had come. Life hadn't turned out the way I had imagined, but it had given me strength I never knew I had. Looking back now, I don't regret my decision. Leaving him was hard, but it taught me something important. I learned to respect myself and to never settle for less than I deserve. Life didn't turn out the way I had imagined, but it made me stronger, and for that I am grateful.